Hello, Charlie TCG here, and welcome back to the channel. Thank you so much for all the support. I'm loving that you guys are enjoying the deck profiles for the post-rotation format. So today's first glimpse is going to be Gardevoir EX, a very much hyped archetype from its insanely strong ability. So, how is it doing right now in Japan? Well, out of the over 600 decks that have got top 8, it has been 3% of that entire meta. It has won 3 events. It's got a few seconds, multiple top 4s and top 8s. It's a really strong archetype because of the insanely good ability where you can just search your deck. Attach as many times as you want a psychic energy from your discard pile to one of your psychic Pokemon. But you have, on the downside to it, you have to put 2 damage counters on it, but you can't use it to knock that Pokemon out, i.e., you can't go down to 3 prizes and then abuse Roxanne to your opponent. It's really good, especially with box style attackers. You can use multiple different ones, like psychic type attackers, like Weirdeer, Mewtwo the Union, even the other Gardevoirs, as well as Zacian and Lunatone. It's really, really good, especially because it can ramp up to so much damage. Although the downside is it can be really, really slow to set up. Once you get into your curliers, you're really, really strong. But to try and get to that stage, you've got to survive like a few turns to try and get to a Gardevoir, like turn 2, or most likely turn 3. But anyway, let's look at the list. So this is my rough list right now. We run a 4-4, basically a 4-4-6 line of Gardevoir Gallade. And I will get to my reasonings behind it. The 4 roles, I really like this one. This is search your deck, switches Pokemon with a bench. Really good switching type in case you get it active. And then you play the Refinement Curlier, the one where you discard a card and draw 2, which is pretty much like the Chinchino, the Zoroark, really, really strong card, just getting the drawing factor and getting those psychic energies in the discard pile. We run 3 copies of the Gardevoir. Now, the reason why it's so high is because you can kind of utilize it as an attacker. You might only need 1, maybe 2 of this per game, but you want to have a high number so you don't worry about pricing it. You could discard some early, as well as it's really, really powerful. It has another attack, which is for 190. That's a pretty decent sort of number. It can not one hit KO lots of things, but it can like 2-shot some things, and it's got 310 HP, and it can be powered up by itself, so it's really good. But you have some, and your other support Pokemon is Gallade. This Gallade is really, really cool from, I believe it is from Astral Radiance, where it is to search your deck for a supporter card and put it in your hand. Really, really good. And then attack 160, and then movement energy. Really, really powerful attack, 2-dotting most things, ability to get any of your supporters you like. As you can see, we run a lot of disruption, and also it helps you get your boss. This isn't on evolving, this is once per turn. So having one of these set up is really, really good. The idea is you want to curlier as much as possible early game, and then you can close up with Gardevoirs and Gallades to really try and like get the attacks and constantly keep the synergy going. And then throughout this line, we run the Gardevoir from Chilling Reign, a really, really interesting attacker where its ability is look at the top 2 cards of your deck, and if there's any entries, attach them to your Pokemon, and then the other ones you just put into your hand. Really, really strong, especially like near late game. If you like shuffle some entries back in, or you know you've got some like few entries in your deck late game, you can just get those entries attached to it. And it's also a really good attacker. 60 damage plus additional more damage for each psychic energy attached to it. This can be utilized with Gardevoir EX to attach loads and loads of energies to it and get some of these big KOs on these V-Stars, V-Maxes, and even EXs, which is something I really, really like. But if you don't want to use that, you can use Zacian V from Celebration. This is a really good card, especially in this list. The reason why it's good, it has exactly the same attack as that Gardevoir, but we can utilize Skysteel Stone. I've added 2 copies of this in my list because the way for you to just really have a huge, powerful Zacian V, and then use Skysteel Stone to get an extra prize of like a V-Star or a V-Max, which can really, really help accelerate like some late turns. You can come out of nowhere and get like a KO on like an Ice Rider, Calyrex, or a Duraludon, which I'm a huge fan of, especially. And especially when you draw 4 prizes instead of 3, it's really, really good. For some support Pokemon, we do run this Cresselia. This is a really good one where you just move 2 damage counters from each of your Pokemon to one of your opponent's Pokemon in play. Or is it one? I can't remember if it's one or each. I believe it could be each. It's a way to heal up some damage from using Gardevior's attack, as well as using that to move it onto your opponent to do damage that side. Very, very powerful. Just another little attacker. Not going to utilize it all the time, but it's going to be really, really good. We do run Manaphy because Curlier can get KO'd by Greninja, Pulse can get KO'd by Greninja, Cresselia can get KO'd by loads of other stuff as well. You want to have as much bench protection as possible. Because say some Lost Box or any deck which can pretty much Lost Box can utilize Greninja, get like a turn to attack, you're really, really struggling. If it hits KO 2 of your Curliers, it can really slow down your turn, and the opponent can kind of take away from the game. So you want to slow them down with your Manaphies. We also run Greninja again for our draw support, trying to get through as quickly as the deck, because this deck really needs a while to set up. Because you can look at its item cards, it's a lot of just ball search and energy search. We play Power Pad, Red Candies, Nest Ball, Level Balls, Ultra Balls, and Fog Crystals. Because this deck is always about you either have a lot of Pokemon, and your item cards, you want to get the Pokemon. That's kind of the idea of this deck, is you want to draw into your Pokemon, get as many energies in the discard pile as possible, and start attacking Gardevoir really, really quickly. And that's when the supporters kind of become really fun. We play 4 Judge. You want to be destructive. You want to hit hard, but also slow down your opponent. Like if you just judge them a few turns and they can't draw out a bit, Gardevoir can kind of sneak in and get the setup it deserves, because it still has the Curlier to draw it out. We do have Boss's Orders and Worker. Worker is a really interesting one. It's one of these fun draw 3, but the additional effect is discard a stadium in play. Stopping Beach Court, stopping even your own Mesa Goza to search for Pokemon on a coin flip, stopping like Path to the Peak or anything like that, or Collapse or Lost City. It's just a really good like draw 3 and then discard a stadium. I really like this. And then also closing up with play one Roxanne, another disruptive card, as well as Miriam, shuffle back into some Pokemon. We play 11 Psychic Energies. It's kind of what you really, really need. You still hit really, really hard. You could argue like you run like a V-Guard energy. Like even Radiant Gardevoir could be used to like boost up the HP of some of your Pokemon, like reducing their effects. But I would rather prefer consistency with Greninja, because you might not need it, but potentially having like that 5th Curlier out is really, really, really good. So the idea of this deck is you just draw as much as you can, try and get set up turn 2, and then power up and just hit with these big attackers like Gardevoir and Zacian. That's kind of the main focus on this deck. So what is this matchups like? Well, it is really quite positive against most of it. Like when I was writing it, I was like, it has a decent matchup around the board. I would say its negatives is definitely Darkrai. Darkrai can just come out and sweep and just win the board really, really easily. Lugia V-Star, it now runs Tyranitar, which is a real big pain for you. And Tina, well, like I said, you have Greninja. It has, so it can like Gust KO up your Manaphies, and also it hits really hard damage. It has high HP, so it can be really, really struggling. But it has a decent, I would say, Mew matchup, because it can get to one-hit KOs on Mew. And I always find if a deck can ramp up to a KO on a Mew, it's a really, really good deck. And if you can use like single prizes as well, really, really tough for Mew to kind of like keep up with. Also, Miraidon decks, I feel like you have a decent shot. Miraidon, especially from testing, is a lot slower than I initially thought it would be. But that's not just saying why it's not as good as it was. But I feel like you still have a really good Miraidon matchup. I tried a Calyrex, again, really high HP. You can utilize Zacian to get some 4 prize KOs or 3 prize KOs on stuff. And Gardevoir can just really, really kind of like weave around. Like you can constantly switch and change like your list as you feel like you want to adapt it. Try and counter some other decks you want to have. You can even run like a Drape. You can't run Drapion V, but you can even add a Drapion V, and it's just to help with some other matchups, because like Single Strike and Rapid Strike are really kind of picking off, and you can run Energy Switch. So there's lots of ways around building the Gardevoir list. So looking back at the list, I think it's just a really, really strong archetype. It's more box focused, heavy on the Pokemon, heavy on searching up for the Pokemon, and heavy on the energies. So it can be a bit clunky at times, But if I'm honest with you, I think it's a really, really powerful archetype. It's definitely getting the results in Japan, and definitely something you should really start to consider and sleeve up to really test. I would also consider potentially, if you want text, you can run Klefki, so you're not worried too much about the slow start, if you can slow down your opponent. But I would also say be really careful with Gardevoir. You can get like hands of just pure Pokemon and not the ones you need. And the idea is you're just purely, the whole deck is there to set up at turn 2 Gardevoir for your rare candies, for your full search. And yeah, it's got really strong attackers with your Zacian and Gardevoirs. You could argue potentially adding like a Lunatone or a Weirdeer. But I really like Sky Steel Stone in the testing. Just getting that extra prize card is really, really nice in this sort of deck. So that is the list overall. Let me know in the comments down below what you think of it. What fun text options you could feel like would fit really well in Gardevoir, and your favorite archetype right now in the post rotation. If you're new, please consider subscribing. It means so much, and I'm loving the support you guys are giving for the post rotation content. Leave me a like and a follow on Twitter. I'll be back in a couple of days posting another deck profile or meta breakdown, and I will see you guys soon. Bye bye.